I'm here because San Francisco is in a crisis. Property owners and landlords talk about profit, they talk about money, but what I want to talk about and what tenants talk about is a home, a stable place for us to raise our children.
Todo esto le ha dado a que haya incendios, entre comillas, que son ficticios, que no encuentran la solución. Y uno de esos incendios me tocó escuchar donde una persona anciana murió. Lo escuché personalmente del landlord, que aparte de que la persona murió, había reportes del Departamento de Fuego que el lugar ocupaba reparaciones. Ella sarcásticamente dice, wow, nos deshicimos del anciano y todavía el banco nos va a pagar el edificio.
This housing crisis has caused a wave of fires in San Francisco. One of those fires resulted in the death of a senior, and that I heard firsthand from the landlord. And I say fires in quotes, right? And one of these cases where a senior died, I heard personally from the landlord say, look, I got rid of the senior and the bank will still pay me out. Isn't that great?
Yo quiero que pasen esa legislación, porque si ustedes no están para apoyar y aplicar la ley como debe de ser, entonces, ¿quién va a hacer esto? Esto no es un lugar donde se vende pescado para que cada quien decida el precio que uno le puede poner a su unidad.
I urge you to support this legislation because if you all, as our elected officials, are not here to protect us and to make sure that we all have rights that are respected, then who is going to do it for us? We're not all here selling our own product, right? We're not all here naming the same price throughout. Everybody is naming their own price for housing, and tenants are getting the short end of the stick.
Hoy en día me siento como un extraño en mi vecindario porque veo muchas caras nuevas, personas que han sido desalojadas, de que vivían aquí en el centro, ahora viven ellos allá. Es todo diferente para mí. Me preocupa qué es lo que vaya a pasar. ¿Les vamos a dejar un lugar a nuestros hijos o les vamos a dejar que las personas crean que pueden decidir nuestra vida como si fueran animales?
I feel like a stranger when I walk through my neighborhood because it's changed so much. People that used to live in my neighborhood have moved out at the city, and people that used to live in other neighborhoods now populate my neighborhood. I worry about if there will be a place for my children to grow up in or live when they get older, or if our fate is going to be decided for us by wealthy property owners.
Le quiero agradecer a la supervisora Kim por esta legislación. Personalmente, realmente creo en la justicia. Y creo que ustedes son las personas adecuadas para hacerla cumplir.
I want to personally thank Supervisor Kim for this legislation. I think that it shows a commitment to justice and a commitment to equality, and thank you for that. Thank you. Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Maria. I'm the housing rights organizer with Causa Justa Just Cause. And it seems like this is kind of a routine for us now, right? We have hours and hours of testimony where tenants tell our city officials the horror stories of what the housing market looks like in San Francisco. Eviction after eviction after eviction. It gets more and more horrible. We have people talking about the ways in which it impacts their health, in which it impacts their well-being, their families, their children, their future generations, their past generations. You all have heard all of it. I had members that were here that had to leave, artists in the Mission who are being denied roommates just because the landlord doesn't want a roommate there. It's nothing, it doesn't violate the occupancy ordinance, it doesn't violate the lease. The landlord just wants to raise their rent and wants to slowly evict them one at a time. Tenants where in Supervisor Avalos' district, District 10, tenants that are being evicted because they don't speak English. They got a notice, and the person that served them the notice did not tell them what it was. It was not in English, and the tenants lost in court because they had no idea what was going on. Where you live in San Francisco, it's not a city where someone should be evicted for not speaking English. I don't believe any of you believe that that's all right, and this legislation actually just clears up loopholes. This takes us back to the spirit of the law. If there are property owners in this room who are afraid of this law, then I worry what it is they're afraid of. If they're property owners that are following the law, that are ensuring that tenants have safe accessible, affordable housing, then they should be all for this, because this legislation actually just keeps people in their homes, makes sure that no one is homeless, and makes it so San Francisco doesn't have to build units for people that currently have homes. We haven't had a chance to talk about the housing balance, but every time we build a unit, 3 or 4 units of affordable rent-controlled housing are lost. We're running in place. We need to stop evictions. If we stop evictions, then maybe we can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Before I moved to the Bay, this is the kind of tenant organizing with which I was familiar. Literal organizing to stop evictions and stop displacement. I was surprised when I found that tenant organizing here also includes opposing things like 8 Washington, and I don't agree with that. Insofar as a lot of opposition to new building arises from people being afraid of evictions, opposing eviction controls harms the cause of adding new residential capacity. So a holistic anti-displacement program includes strong eviction controls like this law, and that's why I support it. And it also includes adding new residential capacity as quickly, as cheaply, as safely for the investors as possible where people aren't living. And there are places still, there are parking lots that we can build on cheaply, fast if we let it happen. So those are the 2 prongs of effective anti-displacement. And we can't have one without the other. Only having one is not going to work. So thank you. I support this.
Thank you. And next speaker.
Hello, my name is J.B. Alajani. I'm here to oppose this legislation. There are several reasons. Many of them have been touched on. But one thing I don't think has been talked about enough is the whole roommate issue. There are leases in place, and the person signed the agreement about, the limit of the number of people that can live there. This is important both for the tenant and the owner. First of all, if a tenant can add a sublease or a person to the unit at will, the owner doesn't get compensated for the extra water bill, the extra wear and tear, all the problems. Also, there's no reason that the tenant couldn't charge market rate, even though they're being subsidized currently with a below market rent. So they can pocket the difference. So that's going to lead to a lot of people doing this at the cost of the homeowners. And they're still the ones reliable and responsible for everything. So where's the fairness in that? This is crazy. It makes no sense. Also concerning the basically what amounts to vacancy control, that's been struck down at the courts a number of times. But aside from that, if a unit does get OMI'd or whatever, and you insist that gets re-rented at the old rent, well, the costs have gone up in the meantime. You don't reimburse the person for that. It doesn't have any provisions for that. Also, who's going to re-rent at some 1987 rent? It's just going to take another unit off the market. So I think these rules are just adding to the hostility, and they're going to exacerbate the housing problem. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Robert Barham. I'm here as a volunteer from the SR Mission Collaborative. I really like to thank Ms. Jane Kim for this legislation, because she approved to be still for the people that elected her to her position, and that I still respect her scruples and her everything. And by myself, I have seen tenants get kicked out of the building for having a roommate because they violated the 8-day agreement in their lease as far as having overnights. These are people that have been together for 8, 9, and 10 years. I have even seen people threaten to get evicted because they share custody of a child, where they stay with the father part of the school year, and with their mother the other part of the school year, and that's in violation of the rent agreement. So this legislation give a family a chance to be a family again, to give a child a chance to live with both parents. It will also give a person a chance to have a place to where their companion can come to stay, other than going to jail, where you could have a companion in your cell with you, you know. But I really wish this legislation would be passed to show that San Francisco still have a heart, and that they just not here just to get the dollars from the corporate businesses and stuff, that the small person still matters in San Francisco. And I thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, my name is Andrew Zita with the San Francisco Tenants Union. I want to say that we support the legislation 100%. Thank you, Supervisor Kim. I also wanted to take this time to remind everyone that the only reason, the Asian American movement is the only reason that landlords that Asian and specifically Chinese people could be landlords was because of the Asian American movement. It was because of the fight for the International Hotel, which was a fight for tenants' rights. Thanks.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Supervisors. Catherine Chu, attorney with the Asian Law Caucus.
Could you speak into the mic?
Oh, sorry.
Thanks.
Catherine Chu with the Asian Law Caucus. I support this legislation, and I ask that you do too. This morning, I was over in Superior Court trying to preserve the tenancy of a 20-plus year tenancy. I'll be back on Thursday trying to preserve another 20-year tenancy. The case that I had this morning, the reason for the eviction was just a minor nuisance. The reason that we're going in on Thursday is for a language barrier where my client didn't understand the notice. In both cases, if the tenants are forced to move out, the rent will increase by more than triple. For example, the rent right now is $800. An empty unit in the same building is currently renting for $4,000. I believe this legislation will help really go to the core dominant motive of why landlords are, why we're seeing this uptake in evictions at this time. This legislation helps the housing crisis, I believe, twofold. First, it does essentially increase the housing stock by allowing roommates to come on board. So whereas you used to have one person being able to stay in a room, now you have two. It also helps preserve the current tenants in their vulnerable state, and it's not going to do any harm to the well-intentioned landlords. I strongly believe that if you prioritize diversity and culture in San Francisco, that you will support this legislation. I'm a native San Franciscan. I went to school here and actually had a class at Lowell from one of the educators who is giving public commentary today. And I believe that if you do want to help preserve the kind of culture that we have in districts like the Mission and in Chinatown, that you will also support this. Thank you.
Go Lowell.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. And it's certainly wonderful being surrounded by former students like Malia and Catherine in public discourse, being a government teacher. I've been teaching in San Francisco since 1985. I'm here to represent the United Educators of San Francisco, just as Benito Santiago did earlier, and I believe Allison Leshevsky did even earlier than that. When people ask educators what's the #1 issue facing education in San Francisco, what they often respond with is housing. Too many of our school communities are threatened by the disruption of teachers and other school staff, let alone our students and their families being faced with eviction by harassment. This seems to us at the United Educators of San Francisco, who, by the way, represent about 6,800 teachers and school staff in the city, represents to us a modest step forward in balancing the legitimate property rights of landlords, but also honoring and respecting the right of people to stay in their home. I'll be leaving this podium to join a clergy and community vigil at a family house out in the Excelsior. Too much of that is happening in San Francisco. Allison Leshevsky, who spoke early, is faced by her eviction by harassment. Supervisor Weiner is well aware of that situation. And it's not a one-off problem. We are in an economic pressure cooker. There are good angels and bad angels, but when people have the opportunity to make thousands and thousands of dollars by evicting tenants protected by rent control and other laws, too many people are willing to take that step. And our members of UESF, in too many situations, wind up on the street looking for homes and often leave San Francisco to teach elsewhere. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Hi, I'm Carrie Gold. I'm the supervising attorney at the Justice and Diversity Center at the Bar Association of San Francisco. I guess I'm one of the people that the landlords complain about because I get pro bono attorneys to represent low-income tenants and to fight their evictions. I've had this entire year, almost all the cases I have had have been breach cases, minor breaches. I, in fact, decided to handle one of the cases because the landlord was a notorious landlord attorney who evicted tenants just all for cause. This attorney, Karen Uchiyama, I took her deposition, and I just think that sworn testimony is the best statement that can be made for why it is we need this legislation. The question. So initially, your view of the building having potential also included some type of analysis of the tenancies in that building? Answer, yes. Question, and what was that analysis? Answer, that all of these people could be terminated. All their tenancies could be terminated for cause because they were all in violation of their rental agreements. What if your view was that they could not be terminated for cause? Would the building have had the same potential? Answer, in my opinion. Question, yes. Answer, I would not have been interested in it. Thank you. I urge you to support this legislation.
Thank you. Next speaker.
My name is Scott Weaver. I'm from the San Francisco Tenants Union. We've heard this afternoon of how severe an imposition this legislation would be for landlords, even though it will save hundreds of affordable units in San Francisco, but they haven't really been able to articulate the severe imposition. How does evicting without pretext, how is that a severe imposition? How is requiring that a breach of an agreement be substantial or a nuisance be substantial a severe imposition on the landlord? Or if the level of occupancy in a unit can reach the legally allowable level of occupancy, how is that an imposition? And you can recover the costs associated with that increase in occupancy. How is that an imposition? Or to require a 60-day notice to remove an illegal unit rather than a 3-day notice. How much of an imposition is that really? Or to have a pre-printed form prepared by the rent board that will inform the tenant in a language that they understand what their rights are. How is that an undue imposition on the landlord? I doubt that in any of these instances landlords would take their units off the market because they couldn't evict for pretext or that they had to give an extra form to a tenant. So if you're committed to affordable housing, as all of you have said you are, this is legislation that will save hundreds of units per year. So please pass this measure now without delay. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. Ariana Casanova, SCIU 10-1. We've heard endless stories today, and this is, as elected officials, part of our responsibility to work and fix loopholes that legislation creates. This legislation really just addresses something that you guys are all fully aware of, that we've heard over and over and over again. And I would urge you guys to support this. As SCIU 10-1, we support this legislation as is. And we're fully aware of these stories. These are not secrets. This is well-known issues. And it is unconscionable to allow a few bad actors to continue to abuse your residents and the culture and preservation of the city and its residents. I urge you all to support this. Thank you for your time. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Taylor Pospischal, and I'm an attorney at the Eviction Defense Collaborative. At our office, we keep seeing more and more evictions based on no fault or low fault, where the clear motivation of the landlord is to get more money by raising the rent. The rent ordinance and rent control were designed to prevent this, and the fact that it keeps happening shows that there are loopholes and that this Eviction Protection 2.0 needs to be passed. This ordinance is necessary to help close these loopholes and protect San Francisco's tenants. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hello. Thank you, supervisors. My name is Deepa Varma. I'm an attorney at the Eviction Defense Collaborative as well, and I've represented tenants for many, many years. And what we're seeing right now is stark. What we're seeing is cases being brought for tiny, tiny little things that should not be the reason to evict somebody. That's not why the San Francisco rent ordinance exists. These days, when I have friends and acquaintances and neighbors tell me that their building was just sold, they're terrified because they are seeing what's happening to their neighborhoods, and they're terrified of getting a notice themselves. And I have to tell them, you need to watch your back. You may have done nothing wrong. You may have never caused a complaint to your former landlord, but you need to watch your back because right now they're out to get you. I should not have to say this to people. This is a city that ought to protect tenants who are behaving themselves. What it shouldn't be doing is rewarding landlords for picking on tenants. It shouldn't be rewarding greed. It shouldn't be rewarding people for moving in a relative for the purpose of raising the rent later. All this legislation does is disincentivize bad actions on part of landlords. It does not reward bad tenants. All it does is protect the good ones. Thank you.
Hi， 我係叫 Anna Lui， 我80歲，我係個 owner 喺度，一個住客咧原本2個人，但係另一個人咧佢又個住客又租第二個人，但係要分租，咁啊後嚟屋主知道就叫佢交翻啲水電費，佢唔肯交，唔同意，佢話除非你每個你賠幾千蚊一個人，我哋就搬走。咁就你知道一個做屋主嘅人收利好昂貴，所以好多啲做屋主寧願賣屋，收利都相當昂貴，有啲屋主都會破產添。
Her name is Anna Lui. She's 80 years old. She's telling her story that I have signed for apartment for 2 people, but they rented additional person for profit. Because the owner had to include the extra water's electronic, so I asked for additional utility fee. Then they disagreed and want to move out, but they had to ask me to compensate $1,000 for each person. And San Francisco law has been overprotected talents, and this law is also make it bully. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hello. My name is Sharon Shea, and I'm a small property owner. I believe tenants are being pitted against landlords. Small property owners are being lumped together with large corporations and newer housing not under rent control. I think we need to work together. Rights can't be given to just one side. Or I fear that you may lose a lot of small property owners in the city. Thank you.
My name is Becky. I'm a small property owner. I oppose this Supervisor Kim ordinance. And as many small property owners already mentioned, this ordinance will create more problem to the rental market. And I was wondering, you all as a supervisor should consider both sides, not only one side, and to set the rental policy more favorable for both sides, not only one side. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, my name is Quan Chin. 我反對呢條法案，因為呢條法案好唔公平，好唔合理。請不要通過呢條法案。Thank you.
My name is Quan Chen. I oppose this legislation. This is a very unfair proposal. Please do not pass this ordinance. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Chidak Bhakta. I'm with the Mission SRO Collaborative and Dolores Street Community Services. First of all, a shout out to everyone who's still here, including you, the three supervisors. Also want to thank, first of all, Jane Kim for sponsoring this legislation. And I'm also here to ask all of you to vote yes on the Eviction Protections 2.0. Evictions protections. Ask yourself, who are you here to protect? Are you here to protect the profiteers who see evictions and displacement as a way to bolster their wallets, those who would seek to take advantage of market conditions and view our crisis as a business opportunity? Are you here for them? Or are you here to protect the poor, the working class, and the middle class? Are you here to protect those who struggle to remain in their homes, those who have to fear an eviction for simply hanging clothes outside, walking their bike in the hallway, or painting a wall in their unit 3 years ago? All of these are true stories as to why people have been forced to be evicted. If you are indeed here with the people, with us, then not only vote this out of committee, but vote for it when it goes to the full Board of Supervisors. What this does is stem the tide of mendacity and cupidity, which is washing away homes and communities every day. Every single day. 24 hours cannot go by in this city without another story added to the San Francisco Book of Displacement. In front of you is an opportunity to keep thousands of tenants from being added to those pages. It is an opportunity for you to step forward by passing this vital item. I also, since Lowell got a shout out, I got a shout out. Shout out G House. I'm wearing the t-shirt, so thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello. My name is Wayne Dufour, and at the age of 63, I've spent 40 years in San Francisco as a resident. Along with my two roommates, we've all lived, worked, and raised children here. Our new landlord offered us, our entire household, the sum of $5,000 to move out. But having been tenants for 10 years in a rent-controlled building in South of Market, we predictably exercised our right to choose to stay. Subsequently, many fraudulent accusations by the landlord were made in a litany of cure or quit notices, 4 and 4 months, weekly posting of 24-hour notices to enter our premises for inspection, and even attempts to tow our car. Then came the unlawful detainer. We fought it, an unsuccessful settlement conference, and then the sudden dismissal of our case by the landlord. His strategy of manipulation was eviction through intimidation. It is not fair that the people who have invested their lives and their families in this city are so vulnerable and expendable. Thank you.
Speaker, please. Good evening. My name is Lorene McAllister. I'm a second-generation San Francisco native and a granddaughter and daughter of landlords. I was taught that prompt rental payments and good behavior over a long period of time by tenants was a valuable asset. However, these qualities are irrelevant in a real estate market in which renters are mere pawns. Even though I've been a tenant in SoMa for close to a decade, it was in 2015 that our landlord first entered our unit. He knowingly engaged in executing a tsunami of litigation, all fraudulent from beginning to end. Yet there's no oversight mechanism or consequence for posting or filing spurious documents. So this kind of abuse remains. People like myself are unscrupulously treated, wind up with a full-time job just defending myself. And having been born in the summer of love in San Francisco, I find that the hallmark qualities of the city, integrity, culture of diversity, and acceptance, our quality is now being tested by putting profits over people. And their qualities are drying up like our reservoirs in a drought on humanity. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Supervisor, my name is Jane Lee. I'm small property owner. We pay a lot of property tax, and please make the law fair for both sides. This law is not fair. No on this law. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Supervisors, my name is Annie Chu. I'm a small property owner. More law is coming. We cannot survive. Have to sell it, but speculators will get it. Bad for the renters. No on this law. Okay, thank you.
Next speaker.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chung Leung Go. I am a renter in San Francisco, but I'm very surprised right here is that it has the rainbow. Is that here is that the owner can rent their property to everyone. That's their freedom. Why we just make a law for them, and we concern about the supply and demand for the houses? Why they just make some laws to make the houses less and less? Why? I want to ask you, Ms. James, are you a renter in San Francisco? If you know the principle of economy, so you know what is the supply and demand. Why you just let the houses less and less? Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Maina Young. I am a small property owner. We came to U.S. as immigrants, and my parents were in the middle age, and we ate nothing but hot dog and potatoes for a long time because we wanted to make it in America, and we finally saved enough to buy the property, and my parents are now in the 80s. They had no idea that the laws will get to this point. They cannot understand, and they are afraid. They don't want to rent. They cannot afford with their health, and financially, they cannot afford to rent. And this legislation, how do you define a substantial violation? And then the new base rent is going to be, if you're going to rent again in 20 years, it's going to be nothing. So right now, with the problem, we need to address it from the root cause. The rent increase is currently limited at 60% of CPIs. Consumer Pricing Index is the minimum inflation, and we are set at 60% of the minimum. And that is totally ridiculous. Nowhere you can find that. And that's the root cause. And people don't want to move. Okay, that's one of the causes, one of the effects. And then you have no housing. Okay, and then the rent goes up. So you need to address the root cause of the problem. The rent ordinance is too restricted. Thank you. So I say no to this legislation.
All right, thank you so much.
Yeah, my name is George Racy. I've been a renter in San Francisco for over 30 years. I've yet to meet, to ever known a honest landlord.
Thank you.
This passage, I recommend that you pass this resolution because it will help to protect trans people of color and the greater trans population, because they are frequently the ones who are egregiously targeted for these unlawful evictions. I have sustained and I have been able to survive these chronic attempts at evictions over the 30 years that I've been here. with the help of eviction collaboratives and other agencies of that nature. So I'm all in favor for your passage of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
My name is Josephine Zhao. I praise Supervisor Kim for your compassion for the renters, but also please spare some for the landlords to strike a balance. If the landlords are not doing a good job, give them a chance to cure as well. Educate and outreach. Lots of government-funded nonprofits for the tenants, but there's none for the landlords. We are all doing this voluntarily, but not for much longer. However, heavy-handedly to punish the no-fault, low-fault landlords indistinguished of the nature is not good. Mom and pop, good operators who love their tenants just and treat them like families will have to sell to speculators if they can't survive. And that will be really bad for the tenants in the building, and we all know that. Or we will have to keep the unit for our family and further reduce the rental stock, making new renters and new immigrants hard to stay in the city. If it is not worth putting in the hard work to serve the tenants, and we can't use it when our children need the place, or when they're done, we have to charge the same rents years down the road as what the current rent is, it really, losing the point. It is hard to believe, but it is true. The harder it is to get back a rental property, the less likely the property will be available for rent in the future. Vacancy control doesn't work. What if your friend borrows your car and doesn't return it when you need it? You won't lend it to him ever again. But this is the reality of San Francisco's rental policy. Old-timers may rake in the unconditional benefits, do whatever they feel like, allowed or not allowed, legal or not legal, add roommates without helping with utilities and liability insurance, but newcomers, new renters will have to be punished for what others have done. Market rent go up crazily is hugely due to chronic unfair legislation. The real solution is to build more so that everyone can have a
Thank you very much. All right, I don't see anyone else in line, but I want to give one final call for public comment on item 9. Please come up if you want to speak. All right, seeing no more public comment is closed at this time. Thank you. Supervisor Kim.
Thank you. I wanted to ask a question to the city attorney. And this is on one of the issues that were brought up, some concerns that were raised about our piece on the ordinance regarding illegal units. And so if a tenant is residing in an illegal unit, whether to their knowledge or not, and the unit cannot be legalized, can the tenant continue to reside in the unit eviction proof per our legislation?
Deputy City Attorney John Givner, the illegal status of the unit could not be a basis for the eviction. The property owner or landlord could evict the person on other allowable bases, like substantial rehab, if that's one of the possibilities in that case.
Okay, so in some cases where the unit cannot be legalized, for example, this ordinance would not prevent an eviction in those cases.
Not necessarily if there's another basis for eviction.
Okay, thank you. And I know a concern was raised as well regarding short-term rentals being an issue in the Eviction Protection 2.0 legislation. And I do want to thank Supervisor Malia Cohen for bringing this to our attention. So we did work with her office to clarify language so that additional occupants will be defined as non-transitory, and STR's legislation provisions regarding tenant use of the unit for short-term rental purpose is referenced. Under the existing short-term rental legislation, tenants who are using their unit for the illegal purpose of unauthorized short-term rental will be given a warning for their first violation. Property owners will be able to evict tenants upon the second violation. So we're happy to add the language of non-transitory to the provision and reference that the STR legislation in Eviction Protection 2.0 to ensure that it is absolutely clear that adding a roommate means being allowed to add a long-term occupant and not a short-term rental. And so I have provided copies to the committee. The amendment is on page 9, and we add a line 4 on lines 7 and 8, for purposes of the subsection 37.9A2C, additional occupants shall not include persons who have an agreement to occupy for less than 30 days. And so this clarifies that the provision around adding a roommate doesn't mean that that roommate can be a constantly shifting short-term rentee. So I'd like to make a motion to amend.
Second. This is for the amendment you just spoke of, right? I'll second that amendment. That motion, I mean. All right. Without objection, this amendment, this motion passes.
Thank you, and I know that most folks have left, but I do want to thank everyone who came out. There was over 2 hours of public testimony just demonstrating what an important issue this is, and just the many different stories that even I had not heard already, but also the immense fear that exists amongst our tenants. I do want to recognize a lot of our small property owners who also came out as well, and I know that we also have many folks that need to understand their rights as well as how the system works. And I'm also sympathetic to some of the stories that were brought up. But we were very careful in drafting this ordinance to really narrowly tailor these issues, these amendments, to ensure that they are protecting tenants that deserve to be protected, and ensure that landlords can evict tenants that are bad tenants, that are repeatedly promoting bad behavior in your units. And we also, I think there's a little bit of confusion around vacancy rent control. It's only in 4 specific cases: owner move-in eviction, lead abatement, capital repair, and condo conversion. If you are truly doing it for those reasons, then vacancy rent control should not be an issue because you're not re-renting that unit again. So we really did this in mind to make sure that we were protecting property owners' interests where there is a legitimate reason to evict bad tenants. This is really in the case of what we are seeing at a wide scale, not from property owners here, because we do have a lot of great landlords in San Francisco, but what we're seeing particularly with larger landlords and property owners that are using these frivolous breach of leases to evict tenants. And so that's what these protections are there for. So colleagues, I'd like to ask for your support to move this item forward with recommendation to the full board.
Okay, before we go on, there's a couple remarks that I want to share with everyone. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. I appreciate your dedication and your commitment. Some of you are starting to become regulars in the chamber, ad hoc staff members, if you will. I want to compliment the folks that are just involved in this entire process as we begin to deal with the affordability crisis as well as housing in San Francisco. Many people are starting to develop a subject matter expertise that is to be recognized and commended. Supervisor Kim, thank you for bringing us this wonderful gift of how many hours? 2 hours of public comment? But important dialogue to have nonetheless. And also to the community members that helped draft this legislation, thank you for bringing this forward for our consideration. I know it took a long time to get us to where we are today. There are several components of this legislation that I agree with, such as the need to provide notices to tenants in their dominant language. I think that's absolutely critical, so that when they're receiving information, they can understand it understand all of it. But there are also a few pieces of the legislation that I think just need to be clarified. And we addressed one of them today in the amendment in this legislation on Section 4, page 9, that relates to the illegal residential occupancy. So while I understand that the issues that many of the tenants are facing when a property owner knowingly and illegally subdivides a property into multiple units, and then use that illegal status to either intimidate a tenant or even evict them to bring their property into compliance. That's actually a very real story that I hear very often. But it's not the only challenge that we're facing when it comes to illegal units. I want to share with you a little bit of a story that's happening in the Bayview community. The code enforcement team that I chair with other city agencies has inspected several pieces of property, particularly in the Bayview community, where what's going on is there's one bad actor in particular that subdivides the home. This is a single-family home in a way that makes it completely uninhabitable. Well, and we've seen many single-family homes that have been subdivided into sometimes as many as 8 different units with horrific conditions, such as exposed wiring, leaving sewage, overflowing garbage due to insufficient trash service, as well as illegally installed stoves and heaters. I think it's important that we recognize that there are instances where tenants should not remain in illegal units. Also, I think there is an important distinction that can be made between illegal units that can be legalized and those that cannot because of life and safety requirements. So I'm not sure really what the right language is at this point to address this issue. This is something that's important to me that I really would like to address. So I wanted just to extend a commitment to working with the sponsor on this legislation and the community to develop a way to address this concern. So what I would like to do is suggest that we continue this item so that we can work on addressing some of the remaining issues. Even if we pass this ordinance out of committee today, it wouldn't be heard at the full board until after our August recess. And I think that taking some time to work on this issue will personally benefit District 10 residents, but I would think that it would benefit the entire city overall. I don't know if there's anyone that has any other thoughts on this. Supervisor Wiener.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to everyone on both sides who came out today. I also want to thank Supervisor Kim for stressing that the so-called vacancy control portion of this is limited to just a few types of evictions. When this was first introduced, I must have misunderstood because I thought that there was a broader vacancy control effort around so-called low-fault evictions, but that is not the case. So it is a much more limited set of evictions that would be impacted by that. To me, the heart of this legislation isn't that. It's about the issues around breaches of the lease and also subcategory of that around subtenancies or subletting. And that, to me, those are the questions that I have. And unfortunately, when we have these debates about landlord-tenant relations, we tend to hear sort of broad statements that all landlords or overwhelming majority of landlords are terrible and dishonest and so forth, and that tenants are generally ne'er-do-wells who are violating their leases. Well, we know that most landlords are honest and just trying to run their business and are not harassing or intimidating or abusing anyone. And we know that the overwhelming majority of tenants are just living their lives and are not trying to violate their lease and are paying their rent and just want to make lives for themselves. And we know that there are certainly some landlords who are just horrible. And I think one was mentioned here today who we have the dishonor of having largely in my district a woman by the name of Anna Kahagi, who is a sociopath. And who is, and I don't say that lightly, I don't usually make bombastic statements in the Board of Supervisors, but this is a woman who there's no other way to describe her. And I have worked with Allison Leshevsky and other tenants who it's hard to even envision having to live your daily life knowing that you have someone whose only goal is to try to get you out, who's doing things like drywalling up the laundry room or doing other just horrendous things to these tenants. And so we've worked closely with the tenants, and I was thrilled that the city attorney's office filed a lawsuit, and Ms. Kahagi and people like her have no place in San Francisco. But we also know that not every allegation of a lease violation is a fraudulent allegation. We know that there are tenants who cause problems not just for the landlords but for other tenants, and so I just want to be careful that we're not broad brushing everything. There's no such thing as a legitimate lease violation by a tenant, because we know that that is not the case. And so I am, I'll support the continuance today. I just want to outline what my questions are. The sections about violations of the lease, the one indicates that the violation has to be quote unquote substantial, which I understand is effectively already the law. And if it's not, then I think it should be, although we want to be clear about what that means. I don't think we want people to be evicted for these really minor violations, leaving your shoes in the hallway, leaving your bike somewhere, the laundry hanging out of someone's home, while understanding that more significant violations, when people are doing things that are impacting their neighbors, other tenants, the property, that's a different situation. There's also language, and I have been asking everyone who will listen about this, and I have not gotten a good answer. On page 9, line 15, I think is the area where it says, when the landlord is endeavoring to recover possession, qualifying the tenant as committing or permitting to exist a nuisance or causing substantial damage. And if you read that literally, it means that if someone is damaging the property or tormenting their neighbors, but the notice is not served for another few days or a week, at the time that the notice is served, they may not be committing the nuisance. And so I think I'm in agreement that we shouldn't allow for a nuisance violation for something that's stale. To say, hey, a year ago you played your music loud for a week in the middle of the night a year ago, and we didn't do anything about it, but now a year later we're going to evict you on. I can understand wanting to avoid those kind of stale violations, because when you have that amount of time that's gone by, it's more indicative of intent. You're not really concerned about the violation. You're just trying to get the tenant out to raise the rent. But that language has to be, I think, significantly tightened, because I think right now it is very, if you read it literally, it's problematic. And then in terms of subtenancies, I think the current law provides that you can move a family member in, you can swap in a tenant or a subtenant or a roommate for a roommate. And I'm open to discussions about how to address in a targeted way some of the problems we're seeing around roommates and subtenancies, because I agree that there are some abuses that are going on, and we've heard about some of them today with people who have very legitimate roommate or subtenant situations and they're being evicted. But the way I read this legislation, and someone will correct me, I'm sure if I'm wrong, is that this effectively eliminates or overrides any provisions in the lease that limit the number of tenants in a unit other than what the housing code provides, which is the maximum that's considered, I think, appropriate in terms of health and safety. So the landlord, including in existing leases, would have no power whatsoever in an agreement that people agree to say this is the maximum number of people that can live in this unit. So again, I'm open to taking a look at a more targeted approach to how we deal with roommates and subtenancies. I'm open to addressing some of what we're seeing around minor breaches and trying to make sure that people are not being evicted for minor breaches. But right now, I think this language is too broad in these two areas. I will also say, and this is just sort of, I think, some of the sadness of human existence, that for people who are sociopathic or bound and determined to harass people and violate the law, they're going to do it no matter what the law says. Unfortunately, Anna Kahagi is violating the law in a million different ways right now. The evictions she's filing are fraudulent under the current law existing today. And so we could amend the law 1,000 times, and people like that are going to continue to harass their tenants. So those are just some of the thoughts that I have. I'll support the continuance today, and I look forward to the conversation over the next, over the August recess and into September.
All right, Supervisor Weiner, thank you very much. Just a point of order to the city attorney. Correct me if I'm wrong, but a motion to continue is the motion that we would have to take first prior to the two motions that are on the table, right? Okay. Madam Clerk.
Thank you. You have a motion to amend, right?
Yes.
That has not been acted on yet?
Correct.
Is that right? It has been acted on. Oh, okay. So that's the only motion on the table, is the motion to continue?
No, I made a motion to move this forward with recommendation.
Yes.
And then Supervisor Cohen made a motion to continue this item.
Right. The motion to continue.
And I believe the motion to continue takes precedence.
Yes, and my understanding is precedence of the motion would be to take the motion to continue first and then to recommend to board.
Thank you very much for that clarification. All right, everyone. So there's a motion I made a motion to continue. Is there a second, Supervisor Weiner?
Yeah.
Yes. Can we take this unanimously, or would you like to do a roll call vote?
Roll call, please.
May we have a roll call vote, please?
And this is to continue to...
This is continue, what is this, item number 9?
Item number 9. After recess, first board meeting after recess is on September 8th. I believe we meet on September 7th.
Why don't we do the second week of September?
Okay, so September 14th?
Yes, please. Okay. 7th is Labor Day, I believe.
Okay.
We're going to move it to the 14th of September.
Okay. On the motion to continue to September 14th, Supervisor Kim?
No.
Kim, no. Supervisor Weiner?
Aye.
Weiner, aye. And Chair Cohen?
Aye.
Aye. 2 ayes, 1 no.
Thank you very much. This motion passes. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not done yet. We still have to call, I'd like to call items 7 and 8 together.
Okay.
Thank you.
Item number 7 is a resolution receiving and approving the first biannual housing balance report for fiscal year 2014-2015. And item number 8 is a hearing to present findings from the inaugural housing report.
Thank you. Thank you for calling these together. Supervisor Kim is the author of both of these items. Supervisor Kim.
Thank you. I am going to make a motion to continue items 7 and 8 to the call of the chair. I think given the time and given the length of the report, it would make sense to continue. And there will be another report, actually, that Planning Department will be coming out with in September anyway. That will be an update on the one that was released in July. And so this will allow the Planning Department an opportunity to actually merge the two reports together and actually add a number of data points that the community has asked for since the July report has come out. So I'll make the motion to continue to the call of the chair.
All right. Thank you very much. And we'll schedule that as soon as possible. All right. All right. Without... okay. So there's been a motion made. So without objection, that's the word I'm looking for. Without objection, this motion passes. Thank you very much. Madam...
Your public comment.
That's right. All right, let's make a motion to rescind the vote. Thank you. Without unanimous support to motion to rescind, let's open up for public comment on items 7 and 8. Anyone would like to speak on items 7 and 8? We're going to continue. Okay. All right. Seeing no public comment.
I recommend continuance.
Okay. Did you want to make your comment formally?
Hi, my name is George Bracey. I recommend continuance in the absence of time.
All right, thank you very much. Is there anyone else that'd like to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, public comment is closed at this time. All right, is there a motion? Okay, motion made by Supervisor Wiener, unanimously accepted by this body. Motion passes to continue. Thank you. To the call of the chair.
To the call of the chair. Okay.
Is there any other work before this body?
There's no further business.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. This committee is adjourned.